Question 1. An electronics manufacturer, Innovate Tech, is seeking to enhance its environmental performance assessment in accordance with ISO 14017-2021, specifically concerning the management of end-of-life products. The company has observed a significant environmental footprint associated with the disposal of its outdated consumer electronics. Considering the principles of life cycle assessment and the growing trend of regulatory mandates like extended producer responsibility, EPR, in various global markets, which strategic approach would most effectively demonstrate Innovate Tech's commitment to improving its environmental performance in this domain? Option A. Proactively redesigning products for enhanced durability, modularity, and ease of disassembly, coupled with establishing comprehensive product take-back and certified recycling partnerships. Option B. Investing heavily in public awareness campaigns to educate consumers about responsible disposal methods for electronic waste, without altering product design or collection infrastructure. Option C. Outsourcing the entire end-of-life product management to third-party waste disposal companies that offer the lowest cost for landfilling services. Option D. Primarily focusing on increasing the efficiency of internal waste segregation processes at their manufacturing facilities to minimize landfill contributions from production waste. The correct answer is A. Proactively redesigning products for enhanced durability, modularity, and ease of disassembly, coupled with establishing comprehensive product take-back and certified recycling partnerships. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations, including the management of end-of-life products. The standard emphasizes a life cycle perspective. When managing end-of-life products, organizations must consider strategies that minimize environmental impact. Extended producer responsibility, EPR schemes are a key mechanism that aligns with the principles of ISO 14017 by placing responsibility on producers for the entire life cycle of their products, including their disposal or recycling. This often involves designing products for easier disassembly and recycling, establishing collection and take-back systems, and ensuring proper treatment of waste. The goal is to move towards a circular economy where resources are kept in use for as long as possible. Considering the regulatory landscape, many jurisdictions have implemented EPR legislation for various product categories, such as electronics, batteries, and packaging, which directly influences how organizations must manage their end-of-life products to comply with environmental laws and achieve the performance assessment objectives outlined in ISO 14017. The most effective approach for an organization seeking to improve its environmental performance regarding end-of-life products, in line with ISO 14017, is to integrate product design for sustainability and establish robust take-back and recycling programs, thereby addressing both upstream design choices and downstream management responsibilities. This holistic approach directly supports the standard's focus on life cycle thinking and continuous improvement in environmental performance. Question 2. When evaluating an organization's adherence to environmental record-keeping protocols, as per ISO 14017-2021, which factor is paramount in establishing the minimum retention period for environmental monitoring data related to a specific industrial process, considering potential legal and operational requirements? Option A. The number of personnel responsible for managing the environmental records. Option B. The longest duration stipulated by any applicable national environmental statute or a specific permit condition for that process, whichever is greater. Option C. The average lifespan of the equipment used for the environmental monitoring process. Option D. The frequency at which the environmental monitoring data is collected. The correct answer is B. The longest duration stipulated by any applicable national environmental statute or a specific permit condition for that process, whichever is greater. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing environmental performance. A critical aspect of this assessment, particularly when demonstrating compliance with environmental legislation and internal policies, is the effective management of records. Record retention requirements are not static and are often dictated by a combination of legal mandates, industry best practices, and the organization's own defined life cycle for environmental data. When evaluating an organization's environmental performance, an assessor would look for a systematic approach to record management that ensures the availability, integrity, and accessibility of relevant environmental records for a defined period. This period is typically determined by the statute of limitations for environmental infractions in the relevant jurisdiction, the duration of specific permits or licenses, and the organization's own risk assessment regarding the need for historical data for trend analysis, continuous improvement, or potential legal defense. For instance, if a company operates under a permit that requires records of emissions monitoring for 5 years, and local environmental law stipulates a 7-year retention period for all waste manifests, the longer of these two periods, or a period defined by the organization that encompasses both, would be the appropriate retention baseline. The principle is to maintain records for a duration that supports accountability, regulatory compliance, and the organization's ability to demonstrate its environmental performance over time. Considering both external obligations and internal strategic needs, the selection of the retention period must be a documented process, linked to specific regulatory requirements or business needs. Question 3. Consider an organization that has observed a plateau in its environmental performance metrics despite consistent implementation of its existing environmental management system. To proactively enhance the effectiveness of its management review process in identifying new avenues for improvement, which strategic adjustment to the review's input parameters would most directly align with the principles of ISO 14017 for driving meaningful progress. Option A. Limit the management review inputs to only those metrics directly controlled by the environmental department, disregarding broader organizational influences. Option B. Increase the frequency of internal audits and focus solely on the compliance aspects of the environmental management system to identify minor deviations. Option C. Systematically integrate feedback from a wider array of external stakeholders, including regulatory agencies, local community groups, and upstream/downstream supply chain partners, into the management review inputs. Option D. Prioritize the review of historical operational data from the past 5 years, excluding any forward-looking trend analysis or emerging issue identification. The correct answer is C. Systematically integrate feedback from a wider array of external stakeholders, including regulatory agencies, local community groups, and upstream/downstream supply chain partners, into the management review inputs. Explanation. The management review process, as outlined in guidelines like ISO 14017, is a critical mechanism for ensuring the continued suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of an organization's environmental management system. A key aspect of improving this process involves ensuring that the inputs to the review are comprehensive and facilitate informed decision-making. ISO 14017 emphasizes that the review should consider a range of information, including the results of audits, the performance of the environmental management system, feedback from interested parties, changes in environmental legislation and other requirements, and opportunities for improvement. When considering how to enhance the management review process, focusing on the quality and scope of these inputs is paramount. Specifically, ensuring that the review incorporates feedback from a diverse set of stakeholders, including regulatory bodies, local communities, and supply chain partners, alongside internal data, provides a more holistic understanding of the organization's environmental performance and potential risks. This broad perspective allows for the identification of emerging issues and the development of more robust strategies for environmental improvement, directly addressing the core purpose of the management review as a tool for strategic oversight and continuous enhancement of the environmental management system. Therefore, broadening the scope of stakeholder feedback and ensuring its systematic integration into the review inputs is a direct and effective method for improving the management review process. Question 4. An industrial manufacturing firm committed to reducing its ecological impact is reviewing its strategy for tracking improvements in resource efficiency and waste minimization. They are considering various environmental performance indicators, EPI, to monitor progress against their stated objectives, which include a significant reduction in energy consumption per product and a decrease in non-recycled waste per revenue unit. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14017, 2021, for assessing environmental performance, Which combination of EPIs would most effectively enable the organization to demonstrate a clear and quantifiable trend of reduced environmental footprint in these specific areas? Option A. Energy intensity, e.g., kWh per unit of output, and waste intensity, e.g., kg of non-recycled waste per monetary unit of revenue. Option B. Compliance rate with local environmental permits and number of environmental audits performed. Option C. Number of environmental training sessions conducted and percentage of employees with environmental certifications. Option D. Total greenhouse gas emissions, Scope 1, 2, and 3, and total water withdrawal. The correct answer is A. Energy intensity, e.g., kWh per unit of output, and waste intensity, e.g., kg of non-recycled waste per monetary unit of revenue. Explanation. ISO 14017-2021 emphasizes the use of environmental performance indicators, EPI, for tracking and improving an organization's environmental performance. The selection and application of EPIs should be driven by the organization's environmental policy, objectives, and significant environmental aspects. When an organization aims to demonstrate a reduction in its overall environmental footprint, particularly concerning resource consumption and waste generation, it needs to select EPIs that directly reflect these efforts and can be reliably measured. A robust EPI system for this purpose would involve indicators that quantify inputs and outputs relative to a defined baseline or target. For instance, tracking the total energy consumed per unit of production, e.g., kWh/unit, or the total waste generated per unit of revenue, e.g., kg/currency unit, provides a clear, quantifiable measure of efficiency improvements. These types of indicators allow for the assessment of progress towards reduction goals and facilitate comparisons over time, thereby supporting continuous improvement. The effectiveness of such indicators is enhanced when they are aligned with relevant national or international environmental regulations and standards, such as those pertaining to energy efficiency or waste management, ensuring both compliance and performance benchmarking. The core principle is to select indicators that are sensitive to changes in environmental performance and directly linked to the organization's strategic environmental goals, enabling meaningful analysis and informed decision-making for further improvement initiatives. Question 5. When initiating the planning phase for an environmental performance assessment as per ISO 14017-2021, what fundamental step is paramount to ensure the assessment's relevance and effectiveness in driving organizational improvement, considering both internal capabilities and external regulatory frameworks? Option A. Establishing clear, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART objectives for the assessment, directly linked to the organization's environmental policy and applicable legal requirements. Option B. Delegating the entire planning process to an external environmental consultant to guarantee objectivity, without significant internal stakeholder input during the initial stages. Option C. Solely focusing on quantitative performance indicators that can be readily measured, disregarding qualitative aspects of environmental performance that are harder to quantify. Option D. Conducting a comprehensive inventory of all potential environmental aspects and impacts without initial prioritization, to capture the broadest possible range of activities. Correct answer is A. Establishing clear, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART objectives for the assessment, directly linked to the organization's environmental policy and applicable legal requirements. Explanation. ISO 14017-2021 emphasizes a structured approach to planning environmental performance assessments. Clause 5.2. Planning the assessment outlines the critical steps an organization must undertake. This includes defining the scope and objectives of the assessment, identifying relevant environmental aspects and impacts, establishing criteria for evaluation, and determining the methodology and resources required. A crucial element is the selection of appropriate indicators that are relevant, reliable, and comparable, aligning with the organization's environmental policy and strategic goals. The standard also stresses the importance of stakeholder engagement in shaping the assessment plan to ensure its relevance and credibility. For instance, if an organization aims to assess its water usage performance, the planning phase would involve identifying all water-consuming processes, quantifying water inputs and outputs, setting targets for reduction, and selecting indicators such as M3 of water consumed per unit of production or per employee. Consideration must also be given to regulatory requirements, such as local water discharge permits or national water conservation laws, which would inform the criteria for evaluation. The systematic identification of these elements forms the foundation for a robust and meaningful environmental performance assessment, ensuring that the subsequent data collection and analysis are focused and effective in driving environmental improvement. Question 6. An organization, following the principles outlined in ISO 14017-2021 for environmental performance assessment, has identified an upward trend in its Scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions directly attributable to increased reliance on a specific fossil fuel for its primary heating system. The assessment also revealed that current operational procedures have not been updated to reflect best practices for energy efficiency in this system. Considering the standard's focus on using assessment results for improvement, which of the following strategic responses would be most aligned with driving substantive and sustainable environmental performance enhancement? Option A. Developing and implementing a comprehensive energy efficiency upgrade program for the heating system, including a feasibility study for transitioning to a lower carbon alternative fuel source, coupled with a revised operational procedure manual and targeted employee training. Option B. Conducting a one-time audit of the heating system to identify immediate, low-cost operational adjustments and presenting the findings to management for informational purposes. Option C. Focusing solely on enhancing the data collection methods for Scope 1 emissions to ensure greater accuracy in future reporting. Option D. Investing in carbon offsetting schemes to compensate for the increased emissions without altering the existing operational processes or equipment. The correct answer is A. Developing and implementing a comprehensive energy efficiency upgrade program for the heating system, including a feasibility study for transitioning to a lower carbon alternative fuel source, coupled with a revised operational procedure manual and targeted employee training. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. Key aspect of this standard is the utilization of assessment results to drive continuous improvement. When an organization identifies a significant environmental aspect, such as increased water consumption in a manufacturing process, the guidelines suggest a structured approach to address it. This involves setting specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives for reducing water usage. For instance, an objective might be to reduce water consumption per unit of product by 15% within the next fiscal year. To achieve this, the organization would then develop and implement action plans. These plans could include process modifications, installation of water-efficient equipment, employee training on water conservation practices, or exploring alternative water sources. The effectiveness of these actions is then monitored and measured against the established objective. If the objective is met or exceeded, the organization analyzes the reasons for success to replicate them in other areas. If the objective is not met, a root cause analysis is performed to understand the barriers, and the action plans are revised accordingly. This iterative process of planning, implementing, monitoring, and reviewing is central to using assessment results for genuine environmental performance enhancement, aligning with the standard's emphasis on a management system approach. The ultimate goal is to integrate these findings into the organization's strategic decision-making and operational practices to foster long-term environmental sustainability. Question 7. Consider an organization that has implemented an environmental management system and is currently undertaking its environmental performance evaluation, EP, according to the guidelines of ISO 14017-2021. The organization has identified key performance indicators, KPI, related to energy consumption and waste generation. The EPE process has revealed a slight increase in energy consumption per unit of production, while waste generation has decreased significantly. Which of the following best reflects the primary outcome of this EPE process in relation to the organization's environmental performance and the intent of ISO 14017-2021? Option A. The EPE process has concluded that the decrease in waste generation is the sole indicator of improved environmental performance, and the increase in energy consumption is an acceptable trade-off. Option B. The The EPE process has successfully demonstrated compliance with national energy efficiency regulations, rendering further analysis of energy consumption trends unnecessary. Option C. The EPE process has identified a need to reevaluate the chosen environmental performance indicators and investigate the contributing factors to the observed energy consumption trend to inform corrective actions for continual improvement. Option D. The EPE process has confirmed that the environmental management system is fully effective, as evidenced by the reduction in waste, and no further actions are required for energy-related aspects. The correct answer is C. The EPE process has identified a need to reevaluate the chosen environmental performance indicators and investigate the contributing factors to the observed energy consumption trend to inform corrective actions for continual improvement. Explanation: the core principle of environmental performance evaluation (EP), as outlined in ISO 14017-2021, emphasizes the establishment of a systematic process for identifying, measuring, analyzing, and communicating environmental performance. This involves setting objectives and targets, collecting relevant data, and comparing performance against these benchmarks. A crucial aspect is the continual improvement of environmental performance, which necessitates a feedback loop where evaluation results inform decision-making for future actions. The standard stresses the importance of selecting appropriate indicators that are relevant to the organization's significant environmental aspects and that provide meaningful insights into performance trends. When assessing the effectiveness of an environmental management system's contribution to overall environmental performance, the focus should be on how the system facilitates the achievement of environmental objectives and targets, rather than solely on compliance with general environmental regulations. Although compliance is a foundational element, the standard advocates for a proactive approach to identifying areas for improvement based on performance data and the outcomes of the EPE process. This iterative process ensures that the organization's environmental efforts are dynamic and responsive to changing conditions and evolving environmental challenges. Question 8. A multinational corporation, Terraform Solutions, with manufacturing plants in the United States, India, and South Africa, is undergoing an environmental performance assessment aligned with ISO 14017-2021. Their operations involve the synthesis of specialized polymers, utilizing various chemical inputs and generating specific waste streams. To ensure a robust identification of applicable environmental laws and regulations for the assessment, which of the following approaches would most comprehensively and effectively capture the relevant legal landscape, considering the distinct regulatory frameworks and the organization's operational scope? Option A. A broad survey of global environmental best practices and voluntary industry standards, prioritizing those with the highest reputational impact among stakeholders, irrespective of specific legal mandates in the operating countries. Option B. An internal audit conducted by the company's legal department, relying solely on previously identified compliance obligations from past audits and focusing only on regulations related to air emissions, as these are perceived as the most significant environmental aspect. Option C. A consultation with a single international environmental law firm that specializes in one of the operating countries, with the assumption that their expertise will extrapolate to the other jurisdictions and all relevant regulations. Option D. A multi-jurisdictional legal review focusing on national-level environmental protection acts and substance control regulations in each country of operation, supplemented by an analysis of international chemical conventions ratified by those nations. Correct answer is D. A multi-jurisdictional legal review focusing on national-level environmental protection acts and substance control regulations in each country of operation, supplemented by an analysis of international chemical conventions ratified by those nations. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. A critical aspect of this assessment is the identification and understanding of applicable environmental laws and regulations. This process is not merely about listing statutes, but about understanding their scope, relevance, and how they directly impact the organization's operations and environmental aspects. The standard emphasizes a proactive approach, moving beyond mere compliance to strategic environmental management. When an organization operates in multiple jurisdictions, the complexity of identifying applicable regulations increases significantly. For instance, a manufacturing firm with facilities in both Germany and Brazil must consider the European Union's REACH registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals regulation, Germany's specific waste management laws, e.g., Kreislaufwirtschaftsgesetz, and Brazil's national environmental policy, Lei da Política Nacional do Meio Ambiente, and its associated decrees. The process involves systematically reviewing the nature of the organization's activities, its products, the materials it uses, and the potential environmental impacts it generates, then cross-referencing these with the legislative frameworks of all relevant geographical areas. This requires a thorough understanding of the legal system, including national, regional, and local laws, as well as international agreements that might be binding. The identification should also encompass permits, licenses, and other authorizations required for operation. Furthermore, the standard encourages considering industry-specific standards and voluntary agreements that may impose additional environmental obligations. The goal is to establish a comprehensive and accurate inventory of all legal and other requirements that the organization must adhere to, forming the foundation for an effective environmental management system and performance assessment. This systematic approach ensures that no critical regulatory requirement is overlooked, which could lead to noncompliance, fines, and reputational damage. Question 9. A manufacturing firm operating under a regional environmental ordinance that mandates a 15% reduction in water consumption compared to the prior fiscal year conducts its annual environmental performance assessment. The assessment reveals that water usage has only decreased by 10%. Considering the reporting guidelines within ISO 14017-2021 for communicating assessment outcomes, which of the following approaches would be most appropriate for presenting this performance gap to relevant stakeholders? Option A. Clearly articulate the 5% shortfall, detail the specific operational factors that contributed to the reduced savings, and outline the revised strategies and timelines for achieving the mandated reduction in the subsequent reporting period. Option B. Focus the report on the positive achievement of a 10% reduction, downplaying the unmet target and attributing the shortfall to external, uncontrollable factors without providing specific corrective actions. Option C. Emphasize the complexity of environmental management, suggesting that the 10% reduction demonstrates a significant effort, and propose deferring the remaining 5% reduction to a future, unspecified review cycle. Option D. Report the total water consumption figures for both years without explicitly mentioning the percentage reduction target or the observed deviation, leaving stakeholders to infer the performance. The correct answer is A. Clearly articulate the 5% shortfall, detail the specific operational factors that contributed to the reduced savings, and outline the revised strategies and timelines for achieving the mandated reduction in the subsequent reporting period. Explanation. The core principle behind reporting environmental performance assessment results, as guided by ISO 14017-2021, is to ensure that the information communicated is relevant, accurate, and useful to intended stakeholders. This involves presenting findings in a manner that facilitates understanding and supports decision-making. When an organization identifies a significant discrepancy between its projected environmental performance targets for a fiscal year and its actual measured outcomes, particularly concerning water consumption reduction mandated by a regional environmental ordinance, the reporting strategy must address this gap transparently. The ordinance, for instance, might require a 15% reduction in water usage compared to the previous year, and the assessment reveals only a 10% reduction. In such a scenario, the reporting should not merely state the shortfall, but also provide context. This includes detailing the specific factors contributing to the underperformance, such as unforeseen operational changes or the ineffectiveness of certain implemented measures. Furthermore, the report should outline the corrective actions planned or already initiated to bridge the performance gap and meet future compliance requirements. This approach ensures that stakeholders, including regulatory bodies and internal management, receive a comprehensive picture of the situation, enabling them to understand the challenges and the organization's commitment to addressing them. The emphasis is on actionable insights and a forward-looking perspective, rather than just a historical account of failure. The reporting should align with the organization's overall environmental policy and objectives, demonstrating accountability and a commitment to continuous improvement in environmental performance. Question 10. Consider a multinational manufacturing firm that has implemented significant process re-engineering to reduce hazardous waste. They report a 40% reduction, supported by internal waste manifests and disposal invoices. According to ISO 14017, 2021 guidelines for assessing environmental performance, what is the most critical factor in evaluating the adequacy of their supporting environmental documentation to substantiate this claim, considering potential regulatory alignment and management system effectiveness? Option A. The documentation's explicit linkage of the process re-engineering initiatives to the reported waste reduction figures, alongside evidence of compliance with applicable hazardous waste regulations and updated operational procedures. Option B. The presence of an independent third-party audit report that generally confirms the organization's environmental commitment without specific focus on the waste reduction process. Option C. The inclusion of employee satisfaction surveys related to the new processes, as this indirectly reflects the successful implementation of management system changes. Option D. The sheer volume of disposal invoices and internal manifests, provided they cover the period of the reported reduction and are signed by authorized personnel. The correct answer is A. The documentation's explicit linkage of the process re-engineering initiatives to the reported waste reduction figures, alongside evidence of compliance with applicable hazardous waste regulations and updated operational procedures. Explanation: ISO 14017, 2021 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations. A crucial aspect of this assessment is the evaluation of the adequacy of an organization's environmental documentation. This involves scrutinizing the completeness, accuracy, and relevance of records and reports that substantiate environmental performance claims and management system operations. When assessing documentation for a multinational manufacturing firm that has recently undergone a significant process re-engineering to reduce hazardous waste generation, the evaluator must consider several factors. The organization claims a 40% reduction in hazardous waste, supported by internal waste manifests and disposal invoices. However, ISO 14017 emphasizes the need for documentation that not only quantifies performance, but also demonstrates the causal link between management actions and observed results, and its alignment with regulatory requirements. For instance, the documentation should clearly link the process re-engineering initiatives to the waste reduction figures. It should also include records of updated operating procedures, employee training logs on the new processes, and evidence of compliance with relevant national and international regulations concerning hazardous waste management, such as the Basel Convention if transboundary movement is involved, or specific national environmental protection acts. The adequacy of the documentation is determined by its ability to provide verifiable evidence of the claimed performance and the effectiveness of the environmental management system in achieving these results, in line with the principles of transparency and accountability inherent in environmental performance assessment. The most comprehensive approach to evaluating this documentation would involve verifying the consistency of internal manifests with external disposal records, cross-referencing the claimed reductions with baseline data from before the re-engineering, and ensuring that the documentation explicitly details the management system controls that led to the reduction, alongside any relevant regulatory permits or compliance reports. Question 11. A multinational manufacturing firm operating facilities in coastal regions susceptible to rising sea levels and increased storm intensity is developing its environmental performance improvement plan. The firm has identified water scarcity in arid regions, where it also operates as a significant environmental aspect. Which of the following approaches most effectively integrates both mitigation and adaptation strategies for these distinct environmental challenges, as guided by ISO 14017, 2021 principles? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive life cycle assessment for all products and establishing a carbon offset program for operational emissions. Option B. Developing drought-resistant landscaping for all facilities and upgrading to energy-efficient lighting systems across the organization. Option C. installing desalination plants at coastal facilities, and transitioning to renewable energy sources for all manufacturing operations. Option D, implementing water-efficient manufacturing processes and investing in advanced stormwater management systems for coastal sites. The correct answer is D, implementing water-efficient manufacturing processes and investing in advanced stormwater management systems for coastal sites. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance, including the implementation of mitigation and adaptation measures. Mitigation measures aim to reduce the causes of environmental degradation, such as greenhouse gas emissions or waste generation. Adaptation measures, on the other hand, focus on adjusting to the actual or expected effects of climate change or other environmental impacts. When evaluating the effectiveness of these measures, an organization must consider their direct impact on the environmental aspect being addressed, their contribution to the overall environmental performance improvement, and their alignment with relevant legal and regulatory frameworks. For instance, a company implementing a new waste reduction program, mitigation, might assess its success by measuring the decrease in landfill waste and the increased diversion rate. Simultaneously, if the company is located in a flood-prone area, it might implement flood defenses adaptation and evaluate their effectiveness by the absence of operational disruption during a severe weather event. The standard emphasizes a holistic approach, ensuring that chosen measures are appropriate, feasible, and contribute to the organization's environmental objectives and targets, while also considering stakeholder expectations and the broader context of environmental challenges. This involves not just implementing a measure, but also monitoring its performance, reviewing its impact, and making adjustments as necessary to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance with evolving environmental regulations. Question 12. An organization has successfully implemented an environmental management system compliant with ISO 14001-2015 to rigorously evaluate the effectiveness of its pollution prevention initiatives and resource efficiency measures, which standard would provide the most appropriate methodological guidance for conducting a comprehensive assessment of its environmental performance, complementing its existing EMS framework. Option A, ISO 19011-2018. Option B, ISO 14004-2016. Option C, ISO 14017-2021. Option D, ISO 50001-2018. Correct answer is C, ISO 14017-2021. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations, acting as a complementary standard to ISO 14001, which establishes requirements for an environmental management system, EMS, while ISO 14001 focuses on the implementation and maintenance of an EMS to manage environmental aspects, risks, and opportunities. ISO 14017 offers a framework for evaluating the effectiveness and efficiency of that EMS and the resulting environmental performance. It does not dictate specific environmental targets or limits, but rather guides the methodology for their assessment. This includes defining the scope of the assessment, selecting appropriate indicators, collecting and analyzing data, and reporting the findings. The relationship is one of strategic implementation, ISO 14001, and performance evaluation, ISO 14017. Therefore, an organization certified to ISO 14001 would typically utilize the principles outlined in ISO 14017 to conduct internal or external assessments of its environmental performance, thereby demonstrating the actual impact and success of its EMS in achieving its environmental objectives. This assessment can inform improvements to the EMS itself, aligning with the Plan-Do-Check-Act cycle inherent in ISO 14001. The standard emphasizes that the assessment should be objective, systematic, and documented, providing a basis for decision-making and continuous improvement of environmental performance. Question 13. An industrial manufacturing company, Veridian Dynamics, is implementing ISO 14017-2021 to enhance its environmental performance assessment processes. The company has identified that its production line supervisors require specific training on assessing the environmental impacts of their direct operational activities, particularly concerning energy consumption and waste generation, as these are significant environmental aspects for their departments. Concurrently, the internal audit team needs training on verifying the accuracy and completeness of the environmental performance data collected by various departments and ensuring compliance with relevant national environmental regulations, such as the Hazardous Waste Management Act, which training program design best aligns with the principles of ISO 14017-2021 for delivering targeted and effective training for these distinct groups. Option A. Conduct a single, comprehensive training session for all personnel covering the entirety of ISO 14017-2021, assuming that a broad understanding will enable each individual to apply the relevant parts to their role. Option B. Focus training efforts solely on senior management, providing them with a high-level overview of ISO 14017-2021, with the expectation that they will then cascade the necessary information to their respective teams. Option C. Develop a modular training curriculum where supervisors receive modules focused on operational impact assessment techniques and data collection for energy and waste, while the audit team receives modules on auditing methodologies, regulatory compliance verification, and data validation protocols. Option D. Provide online self-paced learning modules for all employees, allowing them to choose topics they believe are relevant to their roles without specific guidance on their departmental assessment responsibilities. The correct answer is C. Develop a modular training curriculum where supervisors receive modules focused on operational impact assessment techniques and data collection for energy and waste, while the audit team receives modules on auditing methodologies, regulatory compliance verification, and data validation protocols. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations, emphasizing a structured approach to identify, measure, and improve environmental aspects and impacts. When developing targeted training programs for personnel involved in environmental performance assessment, the standard stresses the importance of aligning training content with the specific roles and responsibilities of the individuals. This ensures that training is relevant and effective in building the necessary competencies for accurate and meaningful assessment. The training should cover not only the principles and methodologies outlined in ISO 14017, but also the organization's specific environmental policies, objectives, and the regulatory framework within which it operates, such as the EU's Emissions Trading System, ETS, or National Waste Management Directives. A key aspect is to equip trainees with the skills to interpret assessment data, identify areas for improvement, and contribute to the continuous enhancement of the organization's environmental performance. This involves understanding the nuances of data collection, the application of different assessment tools, and the communication of findings to relevant stakeholders. Therefore, the most effective approach is to tailor the training based on the identified skill gaps and the specific assessment tasks each group or individual will undertake, ensuring a direct link between training and practical application within the organization's environmental management system. Question 14. A manufacturing firm, Ether Dynamics, is preparing to benchmark its electricity consumption against similar enterprises within the renewable energy component sector. They have calculated their total annual electricity usage and their total annual revenue. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14017-2021 for assessing environmental performance, which normalization factor would be most appropriate for creating a comparative environmental performance indicator (EPI) of energy intensity that reflects economic efficiency? Option A, total units of manufactured product. Option B, total annual revenue. Option C, total number of full-time equivalent employees. Option D, total square footage of operational facilities. The correct answer is B, total annual revenue. Explanation: the core principle of normalizing environmental performance indicators, EPI, is to make them comparable across different organizational scales and contexts. When an organization aims to benchmark its energy consumption per unit of revenue, it is essential to select a normalization factor that accurately reflects the relationship between energy use and economic output, while also considering the influence of external factors. ISO 14017-2021 emphasizes that the chosen normalization factor should be relevant to the environmental aspect being assessed and should facilitate meaningful comparisons. Revenue, in this context, is a common and often appropriate normalization factor for energy consumption because it directly relates the environmental input, energy, to the economic output of the organization. This allows for an assessment of energy intensity relative to the value generated, which is a key aspect of environmental performance benchmarking. Other factors, such as the number of employees or the total production volume, might be relevant for different EPIs but are less direct for linking energy consumption to economic efficiency. For instance, while employee count can influence energy use, it doesn't directly represent the economic value derived from that energy. Similarly, production volume is a physical metric and doesn't inherently capture the economic efficiency of energy use. Therefore, normalizing energy consumption by revenue provides a robust measure of how efficiently an organization converts economic activity into energy usage, enabling more insightful benchmarking against industry peers or historical performance. Question 15. Consider a manufacturing firm, Ether Dynamics, specializing in advanced composite materials. They are undergoing an environmental performance assessment aligned with ISO 14017-2021. Ether Dynamics has identified significant environmental aspects including energy consumption, waste generation, and volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions. They are in the process of selecting specific environmental performance indicators (EPI) to track their progress. Which of the following approaches to EPI selection best aligns with the principles and guidelines of ISO 14017-2021, considering the need for relevance, reliability, and comparability, while also acknowledging potential future regulatory shifts in material sourcing and waste valorization? Option A. Focus on EPIs that measure the total volume of water discharged, regardless of its quality, and the overall weight of non-hazardous waste generated, as these are simpler to collect and report. Option B. Prioritize EPIs that directly measure the quantity of hazardous waste sent to specialized landfill, as this is a current regulatory focus, and supplement with a qualitative assessment of supply chain sustainability. Option C. Select EPIs based solely on readily available internal data, such as total electricity consumed and total water used, without explicit consideration for the specific types of emissions or the origin of raw materials. Option D. Choose EPIs that track the absolute amount of VOCs emitted per unit of product, alongside the percentage of recycled content in incoming raw materials, and the net energy consumption per production cycle, ensuring these are aligned with both current national emission standards and potential future incentives for circular economy practices. Correct answer is B. Prioritize EPIs that directly measure the quantity of hazardous waste sent to specialized landfill, as this is a current regulatory focus, and supplement with a qualitative assessment of supply chain sustainability. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 Guidelines for the Assessment of Environmental Performance of Organizations emphasizes the selection of appropriate environmental performance indicators, EPI, to effectively measure and manage an organization's environmental impact. The standard advocates for a systematic approach to EPI selection, ensuring that the chosen indicators are relevant, reliable, and comparable. When selecting EPIs, an organization must consider the specific context of its operations, its environmental aspects, and the intended audience for the performance assessment. The process involves identifying potential indicators, evaluating their suitability against predefined criteria, and then refining the selection. These criteria typically include relevance to the organization's significant environmental aspects, measurability, availability of data and methods for collection, comparability, ability to compare performance over time or with other organizations, and understandability. Furthermore, the standard stresses the importance of aligning EPIs with strategic environmental objectives and legal requirements, such as those mandated by national environmental protection agencies or international agreements. For instance, if an organization operates in a region with stringent regulations on water discharge quality, an EPI related to the concentration of specific pollutants in wastewater would be highly relevant and necessary. The selection process should also account for the organization's life cycle perspective, considering impacts from raw material acquisition to end-of-life disposal. This holistic view ensures that the chosen EPIs provide a comprehensive picture of the organization's environmental performance, enabling informed decision-making and continuous improvement. Question 16. When evaluating the effectiveness of an organization's environmental management review process according to ISO 14017-2021, which of the following criteria would be the most comprehensive indicator of its success in driving continuous improvement and strategic alignment? Option A. The extent to which the review process leads to verifiable improvements in key environmental performance indicators and facilitates the adaptation of the environmental management system to evolving external and internal issues, including regulatory changes and stakeholder expectations. Option B. The number of new environmental objectives established as a direct outcome of the review and the successful completion of internal audits within the stipulated timelines. Option C. The thoroughness of documentation of the review meeting minutes and the formal approval of the environmental policy by top management following the review. Option D. The frequency with which the environmental management review is conducted and the number of personnel from different departments who participate in the review meetings. Correct answer is A. The extent to which the review process leads to verifiable improvements in key environmental performance indicators and facilitates the adaptation of the environmental management system to evolving external and internal issues, including regulatory changes and stakeholder expectations. Explanation. The assessment of an organization's environmental performance, as guided by ISO 14017-2021, involves a systematic review of its environmental management system and its outcomes. This review is a critical component for ensuring the system's continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. When evaluating the effectiveness of the environmental management review process itself, several key aspects must be considered. These include the scope and frequency of the review, the inputs used for the review, the decisions and actions resulting from the review, and the integration of the review findings into the organization's strategic planning and operational adjustments. A robust review process will identify opportunities for improvement in environmental performance and the environmental management system, ensuring alignment with environmental policy and objectives. It also considers changes in external and internal issues, such as new environmental legislation, stakeholder expectations, and technological advancements. The review should also assess the performance of environmental aspects and impacts, compliance obligations, and the results of audits and evaluations. The effectiveness is measured by the degree to which these elements lead to tangible improvements in environmental performance and the overall sustainability of the organization's operations. Specifically, the review's impact on the organization's ability to adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes, such as the European Union's emissions trading system, EU ETS, or National Pollutant Release and Transfer Registers, PRTR, and to proactively address emerging environmental challenges like circular economy principles or biodiversity loss, are indicators of its thoroughness and value. Therefore, the most comprehensive measure of the environmental management review's effectiveness is its contribution to the ongoing enhancement of the organization's environmental performance and its capacity to meet its environmental commitments and strategic goals, reflecting a proactive and adaptive management approach. Question 17. An industrial facility, Ethelred Manufacturing, is undertaking an environmental performance assessment as per ISO 14017-2021. Their primary environmental aspect identified is the emission of volatile organic compounds, VOC, from their solvent-based painting process. They are considering which monitoring approach would best align with the standards guidelines for assessing environmental performance related to this aspect, considering both regulatory compliance with the Clean Air Act amendments and internal improvement targets. Option A. Relying solely on annual self-reporting of estimated VOC emissions based on solvent usage records, without direct measurement or validation. Option B. Conducting monthly visual inspections of painting booths for any visible emissions and documenting the number of operational hours for each painting line. Option C. Implementing continuous emission monitoring systems, SEMS, at key exhaust points to capture real-time VOC concentrations, supplemented by periodic laboratory analysis of collected samples to validate SEMS data and assess specific compound profiles. Option D. Utilizing a single, quarterly grab sample analysis of ambient air within the facility's administrative offices to gauge overall air quality. correct answer is C. Implementing continuous emission monitoring systems, SEMS, at key exhaust points to capture real-time VOC concentrations, supplemented by periodic laboratory analysis of collected samples to validate SEMS data and assess specific compound profiles. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidance on assessing an organization's environmental performance. Crucial aspect of this assessment is the effective monitoring of environmental parameters. When selecting parameters for monitoring, an organization must consider their relevance to its environmental aspects and impacts, as well as the availability of reliable measurement methods. The standard emphasizes that the chosen parameters should enable the organization to evaluate progress towards its environmental objectives and targets. Furthermore, the monitoring plan should be designed to capture data that can inform decision-making regarding environmental improvements and compliance with relevant legal and other requirements. The selection process should also account for the cost-effectiveness of monitoring, ensuring that the benefits of the data collected outweigh the associated expenses. For instance, if an organization's significant environmental aspect is water consumption, monitoring parameters like total water intake, water discharge volumes, and water quality indicators would be appropriate. The frequency and method of monitoring should be determined based on the variability of the parameter, the criticality of the aspect, and any regulatory stipulations, such as those found in National Water Pollution Control Acts or local environmental permits. The goal is to gather data that is accurate, representative, and useful for management review and continuous improvement of environmental performance. Question 18. A manufacturing firm, Innovatech Solutions, is implementing its environmental performance assessment program as per ISO 14017-2021. They are currently focusing on the accurate logging of electricity consumption for their primary production line. The existing system involves manual readings from meters at the end of each shift. To enhance data integrity and traceability, what fundamental aspect of data logging and recording, as advocated by the standard, should Innovatech Solutions prioritize for this electricity consumption data? Option A. Establishing a documented procedure for meter calibration and regular validation of readings against known benchmarks. Option B. Implementing an automated data acquisition system that directly transmits readings to a cloud-based platform. Option C. Training all shift supervisors on advanced statistical methods for data anomaly detection. Option D. Integrating the electricity consumption data with financial accounting records for immediate cost correlation. The correct answer is A. Establishing a documented procedure for meter calibration and regular validation of readings against known benchmarks. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance, emphasizing the importance of reliable data for informed decision-making and continuous improvement. When considering data logging and recording for environmental performance indicators, particularly those related to resource consumption or emissions, the principles of data integrity, traceability, and comparability are paramount. ISO 14017 stresses the need for a systematic approach to data collection that ensures accuracy and consistency over time. This involves defining clear data collection methodologies, specifying the frequency of measurement, and establishing responsibilities for data recording. The standard also highlights the importance of documenting the assumptions and methodologies used in data collection and calculation to ensure transparency and auditability. For instance, when tracking water usage, an organization must not only record the volume consumed, but also document the measurement points, the type of meter used, and any calibration records. This detailed approach allows for the validation of data and supports the identification of trends or anomalies. Furthermore, the guidelines suggest that data logging systems should be designed to prevent unauthorized modification and to maintain a historical record of all entries, facilitating retrospective analysis and verification. The objective is to build confidence in the environmental performance data, enabling the organization to effectively manage its environmental aspects and demonstrate progress towards its objectives, potentially in alignment with national environmental reporting regulations. Question 19. When developing an environmental performance assessment framework for a multinational manufacturing firm operating under varying national environmental regulations, such as the Clean Air Act in the United States and the Industrial Emissions Directive in the European Union. What is the most critical consideration for establishing the assessment criteria and methodologies according to ISO 14017-2021? Option A. Ensuring that the chosen criteria and methodologies are adaptable to accommodate the diverse legal and regulatory landscapes across different operational regions, while maintaining a consistent core of environmental performance indicators. Option B. Implementing a singular, universally applied assessment methodology that is identical for all environmental aspects and operational sites to ensure comparability, even if it does not fully capture regional nuances. Option C. Focusing solely on quantifiable metrics and neglecting qualitative aspects of environmental performance to simplify data collection and analysis across all subsidiaries. Option D. Prioritizing the adoption of the most stringent international environmental standards as the universal benchmark for all assessment criteria, regardless of local applicability or feasibility. The correct answer is A. Ensuring that the chosen criteria and methodologies are adaptable to accommodate the diverse legal and regulatory landscapes across different operational regions, while maintaining a consistent core of environmental performance indicators. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidance on establishing criteria and methodologies for assessing an organization's environmental performance. A crucial aspect of this is ensuring that the chosen assessment criteria are relevant, reliable, and scientifically sound, and that the methodologies employed are appropriate for the scope and objectives of the assessment. When an organization is evaluating its performance against established benchmarks or regulatory requirements, such as those stipulated by the European Union's Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, for greenhouse gas emissions or national water quality standards, the selection of appropriate assessment criteria is paramount. These criteria must directly relate to the environmental aspects being measured and should be quantifiable where possible. Methodologies for assessment should be clearly defined, repeatable, and capable of providing consistent results. For instance, if assessing the environmental impact of a new manufacturing process, the methodology might involve life cycle assessment, LCA, principles, energy audits, or waste stream analysis. The selection of criteria should consider the specific environmental aspects identified in the organization's environmental policy and objectives, as well as any legal or other requirements applicable to its operations. The process of establishing these criteria and methodologies is iterative and should involve relevant stakeholders to ensure comprehensive and accepted evaluation. The objective is to achieve a robust and credible assessment that supports continuous improvement in environmental performance. Therefore, the most appropriate approach to defining assessment criteria for environmental performance under ISO 14017-2021 involves aligning them with the organization's specific environmental aspects, objectives, and applicable legal frameworks, ensuring they are measurable and scientifically defensible. Question 20. An organization is developing its environmental performance assessment framework in accordance with ISO 14017-2021, aiming to demonstrably link its operational improvements to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. Which of the following approaches would most effectively integrate and communicate this linkage, ensuring that environmental performance metrics directly inform and reflect progress towards specific SDGs? Option A. Conducting a one-time gap analysis of current environmental practices against all 17 SDGs and documenting any perceived alignment in an internal report. Option B. Implementing a new environmental management system based solely on the principles of ISO 14001, assuming that compliance automatically fulfills SDG reporting requirements. Option C. Establishing a materiality matrix that maps identified significant environmental aspects against relevant SDG targets, with subsequent performance indicators directly measuring contributions to those prioritized SDGs. Option D. Publicly stating a commitment to several SDGs and reporting aggregated environmental data without specific causal links to the chosen goals. The correct answer is C. Establishing a materiality matrix that maps identified significant environmental aspects against relevant SDG targets, with subsequent performance indicators directly measuring contributions to those prioritized SDGs. Explanation: The core principle of ISO 14017-2021 is to provide guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. Linking this performance to broader sustainability goals, such as those outlined in the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, requires a systematic approach that goes beyond mere compliance. The standard emphasizes the identification of significant environmental aspects and their impacts, which then need to be contextualized within the organization's strategic objectives and external stakeholder expectations. When considering how to effectively demonstrate this linkage, an organization must move beyond simply reporting environmental data. It needs to establish a clear causal relationship between its environmental management system's outputs, e.g., reduced emission, waste diversion, and progress towards specific, measurable sustainability targets. This involves selecting appropriate indicators that reflect both environmental performance and contribution to sustainability objectives, and then integrating these into the organization's reporting frameworks. For instance, if an SDG target relates to clean water access, an organization might link its water usage reduction efforts, an environmental performance metric, to this goal by quantifying the potential impact on local water availability or quality. The process requires a deep understanding of both the organization's operational context and the global sustainability agenda. It necessitates a robust data collection and analysis system capable of demonstrating not just operational efficiency, but also strategic alignment with long-term societal and environmental well-being. The key is to translate environmental actions into tangible contributions to overarching sustainability ambitions, ensuring that the assessment of environmental performance serves as a meaningful input for broader sustainability strategy. Question 21. Considering the principles outlined in ISO 14017-2021 for the assessment of environmental performance, which of the following approaches to selecting environmental performance indicators (EPI) best aligns with the standard's emphasis on relevance, reliability, and driving demonstrable improvement within an organization's specific operational context? Option A. Selecting a broad range of EPIs from industry-wide benchmarks to ensure comprehensive coverage, without a thorough initial evaluation of their direct applicability or potential for improvement within the organization's unique operational framework. Option B. Prioritizing EPIs that are easily quantifiable with readily available data, even if they do not directly address the organization's most significant environmental aspects identified in its impact assessment. Option C. Focusing on EPIs that are directly linked to the organization's identified significant environmental aspects, ensuring data availability and quality, and establishing clear targets for improvement based on these indicators to facilitate informed management decisions. Option D. Adopting EPIs that are mandated by external regulatory bodies, irrespective of whether these indicators provide a complete or nuanced picture of the organization's overall environmental performance or its key areas for improvement. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing EPIs that are easily quantifiable with readily available data, even if they do not directly address the organization's most significant environmental aspects identified in its impact assessment. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021, in its guidelines for assessing environmental performance, emphasizes the selection and application of environmental performance indicators, EPI. These indicators are crucial for measuring, monitoring, and improving an organization's environmental impact. When selecting EPIs, the standard advocates for a systematic approach that considers the organization's specific context, significant environmental aspects, and the intended purpose of the assessment. A key principle is ensuring that the chosen EPIs are relevant, reliable, and understandable. For instance, an organization aiming to reduce its carbon footprint might select EPIs related to direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions, such as tex kg CO2 tex dec per unit of production or tex total tons of CO2 tex dec emitted annually . The standard also stresses the importance of comparability, allowing for benchmarking against internal targets, historical data, or external industry standards. The selection process should also consider the availability and quality of data, the cost-effectiveness of data collection, and the potential for these indicators to drive meaningful environmental improvements. An EPI that is difficult to measure or does not directly relate to a significant environmental aspect would be less effective. Furthermore, the guidelines suggest that EPIs should be reviewed periodically to ensure their continued relevance and accuracy as the organization's operations and environmental context evolve. The focus is on indicators that provide actionable insights, facilitating informed decision-making for environmental management. Question 22. A manufacturing firm specializing in the production of advanced composite materials is undertaking an environmental performance assessment in accordance with ISO 14017-2021. The firm's primary energy source is natural gas, and a significant portion of its waste stream consists of cured resin scraps and composite dust. The company is also subject to the European Union's Industrial Emissions Directive, WIDE, regarding volatile organic compound, VOC, emissions from its curing processes. Considering the principles of environmental performance assessment and the need to identify opportunities for impact reduction, which of the following strategic approaches would most effectively align with the standard's guidance and address the firm's identified environmental aspects? Option A. Prioritizing the reduction of natural gas consumption through insulation upgrades to the facility and exploring the feasibility of installing solar panels to supplement their energy needs, while also focusing on employee training for waste minimization practices. Option B. Conducting a comprehensive life cycle assessment of their composite materials, focusing on material substitution for lower-impact resins and optimizing the energy efficiency of their curing ovens, while also exploring waste valorization techniques for cured resin scraps to align with circular economy principles and reduce landfill dependency. Option C. Engaging with suppliers to source recycled composite materials and establishing a take-back program for end-of-life products, while also intensifying efforts to reduce packaging waste generated during product distribution. Option D. Implementing a strict waste segregation program to separate cured resin scraps from other waste streams, and investing in advanced filtration systems for their curing ovens to capture particulate matter, thereby improving air quality around the facility. The correct answer is B. Conducting a comprehensive life cycle assessment of their composite materials, focusing on material substitution for lower-impact resins, and optimizing the energy efficiency of their curing ovens, while also exploring waste valorization techniques for cured resin scraps to align with circular economy principles and reduce landfill dependency. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14017-2021 is to provide guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. Identifying opportunities for reducing environmental impacts is a crucial step in this process, directly contributing to the organization's environmental objectives and overall performance improvement. This involves a systematic review of an organization's activities, products, and services to pinpoint areas where resource consumption, emissions, or waste generation can be minimized. The standard emphasizes a life cycle perspective, meaning that impacts are considered from raw material acquisition through to end-of-life disposal. Therefore, an effective approach to identifying these opportunities involves analyzing the entire value chain, not just direct operational activities. This analysis should consider technological advancements, changes in operational practices, and potential shifts towards more sustainable materials or processes. Furthermore, understanding relevant environmental legislation, such as the EU's Waste Framework Directive or national emissions standards, is vital as compliance often presents opportunities for improvement. For instance, a company might identify an opportunity to reduce its hazardous waste by reformulating a product to eliminate a regulated substance, thereby not only reducing its environmental footprint, but also ensuring compliance and potentially avoiding future penalties. The process also involves engaging stakeholders, as their insights can reveal previously unrecognized impact areas or innovative solutions. Question 23. When an organization is conducting an environmental performance assessment according to ISO 14017-2021, and it needs to establish a baseline for its water consumption, which of the following data collection and analysis strategies would best align with the standard's emphasis on comparability and the inclusion of regulatory context, such as local water usage permits? Option A. Relying solely on employee self-reported estimates of water usage in different operational areas to establish a general trend. Option B. gathering daily readings from individual departmental water meters without cross-referencing with any external regulatory benchmarks or total intake figures. Option C. Collecting monthly total water intake from the main municipal supply meter and comparing it against the permissible withdrawal limits specified in the organization's environmental operating license. Option D. Analyzing the organization's historical electricity bills, assuming a direct correlation between energy consumption and water usage for cooling systems. Correct answer is C. Collecting monthly total water intake from the main municipal supply meter and comparing it against the permissible withdrawal limits specified in the organization's environmental operating license. Explanation: ISO 14017, 2021, which provides guidelines for assessing the environmental performance of organizations, emphasizes the importance of robust data collection and analysis when evaluating an organization's environmental performance, particularly concerning resource consumption and waste generation. The standard advocates for a systematic approach. This involves identifying relevant data sources, establishing data collection protocols, and ensuring data quality. For instance, when assessing energy consumption, an organization would need to collect data on electricity, natural gas, and any other energy sources used. Similarly, for waste management, data on the types, quantities, and disposal methods of waste generated is crucial. The analysis phase then involves processing this raw data to identify trends, patterns, and areas for improvement. This might include calculating energy intensity per unit of production, waste diversion rates, or the proportion of recycled materials used. The standard stresses that the chosen indicators and data collection methods should be appropriate for the organization's context and the specific environmental aspects being assessed. Furthermore, it highlights the need to consider regulatory requirements, such as those mandated by the European Union's Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, or national environmental protection agencies, which often dictate specific data reporting formats and metrics. The analysis should aim to provide a clear and verifiable picture of the organization's environmental performance, enabling informed decision-making and the setting of meaningful environmental objectives. The effectiveness of the assessment hinges on the reliability and relevance of the data gathered and the rigor of the analytical techniques employed. Question 24. Consider a hypothetical scenario at an advanced materials synthesis plant that handles highly reactive metallic powders and operates under stringent national environmental protection legislation. Which of the following potential emergency scenarios, when evaluated for its impact on environmental performance assessment, according to ISO 14017, 2021, presents the most significant and complex challenge for immediate containment and long-term remediation efforts? Option A. A mechanical failure in a non-critical cooling system for a laboratory fume hood, causing a slight increase in ambient temperature within the immediate workspace. Option B. A temporary overload of a wastewater treatment unit, resulting in a brief, localized discharge of moderately elevated levels of inert suspended solids into an adjacent municipal sewer system. Option C. A minor, contained spill of a non-toxic solvent onto an impervious internal floor, requiring only standard cleanup procedures and disposal as non-hazardous waste. Option D. A sudden, uncontained atmospheric dispersion of fine pyrophoric metallic dust from a ventilation system failure during a high-temperature synthesis process, leading to widespread surface contamination and potential ignition risks. Correct answer is D. A sudden, uncontained atmospheric dispersion of fine pyrophoric metallic dust from a ventilation system failure during a high-temperature synthesis process, leading to widespread surface contamination and potential ignition risks. Explanation: ISO 14017, 2021 provides guidelines for assessing environmental performance. A critical component of this assessment, particularly when considering operational control and the potential for environmental incidents, is the identification of potential emergency scenarios. The standard emphasizes a proactive approach to anticipating and preparing for events that could have significant environmental consequences. This involves systematically reviewing operational processes, material handling, storage, and potential failure points. For a chemical manufacturing facility that utilizes volatile organic compounds, VOC, and operates under strict environmental regulations like the Clean Air Act, or equivalent national legislation, a key consideration for identifying potential emergency scenarios would be to analyze the inherent risks associated with these substances and processes. A leak from a storage tank containing a high concentration of a flammable VOC, especially if it leads to an uncontrolled release into the atmosphere and ignition, represents a severe potential emergency. This scenario encompasses aspects of containment failure, substance volatility, flammability, and the potential for widespread environmental contamination and safety hazards. Therefore, evaluating the likelihood and consequences of such a release is paramount in developing robust emergency preparedness and response plans aligned with the principles of environmental performance assessment. Question 25. Considering the iterative nature of the Plan-Do-Check Act (PDCA) cycle as applied to an organization's environmental management system, EMS, in accordance with ISO 14017-2021, what is the most effective approach to ensure that the check phase yields actionable insights for continuous environmental performance improvement? Option A. Engaging in broad stakeholder consultations to gather qualitative feedback without a structured analysis of quantitative environmental performance indicators. Option B. Focusing solely on the implementation of new environmental technologies identified during the do phase, irrespective of current performance data. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive review of all documented environmental policies and procedures without reference to actual performance metrics. Option D. Systematically analyzing collected performance monitoring data and comparing it against established environmental objectives and legal compliance requirements. The correct answer is D. Systematically analyzing collected performance monitoring data and comparing it against established environmental objectives and legal compliance requirements. Explanation: the Plan-Do-Check Act (PDCA) cycle is a fundamental iterative four-step management method used in business for the control and continuous improvement of processes and products. In the context of ISO 14017-2021, which provides guidelines for assessing environmental performance, the PDCA cycle is crucial for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an environmental management system, EMS. The plan phase involves identifying environmental aspects, establishing objectives and targets, and defining the processes needed to achieve them, considering relevant legislation and stakeholder expectations. The do phase is about implementing the plan processes, including training, communication, operational control, and emergency preparedness. The check phase involves monitoring and measuring environmental performance against objectives and targets, analyzing results, and reviewing compliance with legal requirements. This phase is critical for identifying deviations and areas for improvement. The ACT phase then focuses on taking actions to continually improve environmental performance, which includes correcting nonconformities, implementing corrective and preventive actions, and updating the EMS based on the review and monitoring results. Therefore, the most effective way to ensure that the check phase of the PDCA cycle within an EMS framework, as guided by ISO 14017-2021, leads to actionable improvements is by systematically analyzing the data collected from performance monitoring and comparing it against established environmental objectives and legal compliance requirements. This systematic comparison allows for the identification of trends, root causes of any nonconformities, and opportunities for enhanced environmental stewardship. Question 26. An industrial manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, is undertaking a comprehensive review of its environmental performance evaluation (EP) framework in accordance with ISO 14017-2021. They have identified a significant environmental aspect related to energy consumption. To effectively monitor and assess their progress in reducing energy intensity, which of the following approaches for establishing relevant performance indicators would be most aligned with the principles of EPE as detailed in the standard? Option A. Selecting indicators based on the ease of data collection, even if these indicators do not directly correlate with the firm's most significant environmental impacts or strategic improvement goals. Option B. Prioritizing indicators that are directly linked to the organization's significant environmental aspects and environmental policy, ensuring they are measurable, relevant, and capable of demonstrating trends in energy intensity over time. Option C. Focusing exclusively on globally recognized benchmarks for energy consumption in similar industries, regardless of the firm's specific operational context or internal improvement targets. Option D. Developing a broad set of qualitative indicators that describe general environmental efforts without a specific focus on quantifiable energy usage metrics. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing indicators that are directly linked to the organization's significant environmental aspects and environmental policy, ensuring they are measurable, relevant, and capable of demonstrating trends in energy intensity over time. Explanation. The core principle of environmental performance evaluation (EP), as outlined in ISO 14017-2021, involves establishing relevant indicators to monitor and assess an organization's environmental performance. These indicators are crucial for tracking progress against objectives and targets, identifying areas for improvement, and making informed decisions. When considering the establishment of such indicators, the standard emphasizes a systematic approach that considers both quantitative and qualitative aspects of environmental performance. The selection process should prioritize indicators that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound smart, and that directly relate to the organization's significant environmental aspects and its overall environmental policy. For instance, an organization aiming to reduce its water consumption would select indicators like total water withdrawal per unit of production or percentage of recycled water used. The process also involves considering the availability and reliability of data, the comparability of performance over time, and the ability of the indicators to reflect the effectiveness of environmental management activities. This systematic approach ensures that the EPE process provides meaningful insights and supports continuous improvement in environmental performance, aligning with the broader objectives of environmental management systems. Question 27. An industrial manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, is undergoing an assessment of its environmental performance according to ISO 14017-2021. Veridian Dynamics has met all regulatory requirements, including adherence to the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment (WEEE) directive and local air quality standards. However, the assessment team observes that the company's primary focus remains on end-of-pipe pollution control rather than integrating preventative strategies throughout its value chain. Which of the following actions, if adopted by Veridian Dynamics, would most significantly demonstrate a deeper commitment to promoting sustainable practices as envisioned by ISO 14017-2021? Option A. Investing in advanced filtration systems for all effluent discharge points to ensure compliance with the strictest permissible limits set by the National Environmental Protection Agency. Option B. Securing third-party certification for its existing environmental management system, which primarily documents compliance with current legal obligations. Option C. Establishing a cross-functional team to redesign product lines for enhanced recyclability and reduced material intensity, coupled with a commitment to sourcing a majority of raw materials from certified sustainable suppliers. Option D. Implementing a comprehensive employee training program focused solely on hazard communication and emergency response procedures related to chemical handling. The correct answer is C. Establishing a cross-functional team to redesign product lines for enhanced recyclability and reduced material intensity, coupled with a commitment to sourcing a majority of raw materials from certified sustainable suppliers. Explanation. ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. A key aspect is the integration of sustainability principles into operational decision-making. When evaluating an organization's commitment to promoting sustainable practices, it's crucial to look beyond mere compliance with environmental regulations, such as the EU's REACH, registration, evaluation, authorization and restriction of chemicals, or national emission standards. The standard emphasizes a proactive approach that considers the entire life cycle of products and services. This involves fostering innovation in resource efficiency, exploring circular economy models, and engaging stakeholders in environmental stewardship. For instance, an organization that actively seeks to reduce its reliance on virgin materials by incorporating recycled content, invests in renewable energy sources for its operations, and collaborates with suppliers to improve their environmental performance, is demonstrating a more advanced level of commitment to sustainable practices than one that solely focuses on meeting minimum legal requirements. The emphasis is on continuous improvement and the embedding of environmental considerations into the core business strategy, aligning with broader societal sustainability goals. This holistic view differentiates genuine sustainable practice promotion from superficial environmental management. Question 28. During an environmental performance assessment conducted according to ISO 14017-2021, a manufacturing facility identifies the use of a specific solvent in its cleaning process as an environmental aspect. The solvent, while not directly toxic in small quantities, is volatile and contributes to volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions. These emissions, when aggregated across all cleaning operations, exceed the threshold set by local air quality regulations, potentially leading to non-compliance and contributing to regional smog formation. Considering the guidelines within ISO 14017-2021 for determining significant environmental aspects, which of the following best categorizes the significance of this solvent usage and its associated VOC emissions? Option A, potentially significant, contingent on the precise concentration of VOCs released per unit of product manufactured. Option B, significant due to potential regulatory noncompliance and contribution to regional air quality issues. Option C, significant primarily because it represents a novel aspect introduced into the operational processes. Option D, insignificant, as the solvent itself is not classified as highly toxic in direct contact. The correct answer is B, significant due to potential regulatory noncompliance and contribution to regional air quality issues. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021 provides guidelines for assessing an organization's environmental performance. A critical component of this assessment is the identification and evaluation of environmental aspects, which are elements of an organization's activities, products, or services that can interact with the environment. Environmental impacts are the changes to the environment, whether adverse or beneficial, resulting from these aspects. The standard emphasizes a systematic approach to determining which aspects are significant, meaning they have or can have a significant environmental impact. This significance determination is crucial for prioritizing environmental objectives and improving performance. It involves considering various criteria, often in combination, such as the severity of the impact, the frequency of the aspect, the scale of the activity, regulatory compliance, and stakeholder concerns. For instance, a company's water discharge is an environmental aspect. The resulting change in the receiving water body's temperature or chemical composition is the environmental impact. If this temperature change exceeds regulatory limits or causes harm to aquatic life, it would likely be considered a significant aspect. The standard guides organizations to establish criteria for significance that align with their environmental policy and strategic objectives, ensuring that the most impactful aspects receive the greatest attention in their environmental management system. Question 29. When assessing the environmental documentation of a chemical manufacturing plant that has introduced a novel solvent recovery system, what specific aspect of the documentation is paramount for verifying the system's claimed reduction in volatile organic compound (VOC) emissions, particularly in relation to national air quality regulations? Option A, a comprehensive list of all potential VOCs that could be emitted, without specific quantitative data related to the new recovery system's performance. Option B, historical environmental audit reports from prior years that do not specifically address the new solvent recovery system's operational impact on emissions. Option C, marketing materials and press releases highlighting the company's commitment to reducing VOCs, irrespective of the technical data presented. Option D, the presence of detailed, dated logs of solvent input, recovery rates, and final disposal manifests, cross-referenced with the plant's environmental management system records and emissions monitoring reports that align with regulatory reporting thresholds. The correct answer is D, the presence of detailed, dated logs of solvent input, recovery rates, and final disposal manifests, cross-referenced with the plant's environmental management system records and emissions monitoring reports that align with regulatory reporting thresholds. Explanation: ISO 14017-2021, in its guidelines for assessing organizational environmental performance, emphasizes the critical role of documented information in substantiating claims and demonstrating conformity. When evaluating the adequacy of environmental documentation for a manufacturing firm that has recently implemented a new wastewater treatment process, the focus should be on whether the documentation comprehensively reflects the operational realities and regulatory compliance requirements. This involves examining the completeness, accuracy, and accessibility of records pertaining to the new process. Specifically, the documentation must clearly outline the design parameters of the treatment system, operational procedures, monitoring protocols, and the results of that monitoring. Furthermore, it needs to demonstrate adherence to relevant environmental legislation, such as the Clean Water Act or equivalent national legislation, which sets discharge limits for various pollutants. The documentation's adequacy is determined by its ability to provide objective evidence that the environmental performance objectives related to wastewater discharge are being met. This includes having records of influent and effluent quality, chemical usage in the treatment process, maintenance logs for the equipment, and any incident reports or corrective actions taken. The absence of detailed operational logs, up-to-date discharge permits, or performance trend analyses would indicate a deficiency in the documentation's adequacy for a robust environmental performance assessment. Therefore, the most critical aspect is the direct linkage between the documented information and the actual environmental performance, ensuring it can support claims of compliance and effectiveness. Question 30. During an environmental performance assessment for a multinational manufacturing firm operating under the guidelines of ISO 14017-2021, an assessor discovers that while the company maintains detailed records of energy consumption and waste generation, there is a significant gap in the documentation pertaining to the life cycle impacts of its raw material sourcing, particularly concerning biodiversity and water usage in supplier regions. Which of the following documentary evidence would be most critical for the assessor to request to establish a more comprehensive understanding of the organization's environmental performance in this specific area, considering the potential influence of international environmental regulations and supply chain transparency initiatives? Option A. Historical data on the organization's own on-site environmental incidents and corrective action plans implemented for those incidents. Option B. Publicly available corporate social responsibility reports that include broad statements on sustainable sourcing without specific data on raw material impacts. Option C. Internal communication logs regarding environmental policy updates and employee training attendance records for general environmental awareness. Option D. Supplier environmental impact assessments and third-party certifications for raw materials, alongside records of audits conducted on supplier environmental practices. The correct answer is D. Supplier environmental impact assessments and third-party certifications for raw materials, alongside records of audits conducted on supplier environmental practices. Explanation: the assessment of an organization's environmental performance, as guided by ISO 14017-2021, necessitates a thorough review of its environmental documentation and records. These documents serve as the primary evidence for evaluating the effectiveness of environmental management systems and the achievement of environmental objectives. When evaluating such records, it is crucial to ensure they are comprehensive, accurate, and readily accessible for verification. This includes not only records directly related to environmental performance indicators, but also those pertaining to legal compliance, operational controls, and management review processes. The integrity of these records directly impacts the validity of the performance assessment. For instance, a lack of detailed records for waste management activities or incomplete documentation of emissions monitoring would significantly hinder the ability to accurately gauge the organization's environmental impact and adherence to regulatory requirements, such as those mandated by national environmental protection agencies or international agreements. The standard emphasizes that records should demonstrate that environmental policies are being implemented and that objectives and targets are being met, or that corrective actions are being taken. The selection of appropriate documentation for review involves identifying those that provide the most robust evidence of an organization's environmental commitment and operational control. This would include, but not be limited to, environmental permits, monitoring reports, internal audit findings, management review minutes, and records of training on environmental procedures. The goal is to ascertain the reliability and completeness of the information used to support the assessment conclusions.